Welcome to the Irish NFL show. We're previewing and making game picks for the Week 15 games. Well, 'tis the season of overindulgence, and that, of course, applies to football as to all else because we've waved goodbye to the buys from weeks 15 to 18. It's 16 games, full schedule every weekend, and of course, it's a particular delight to those of us NFL junkies in this time zone because we welcome back the Saturday games from this weekend forward. So a feast of festive football to get ourselves stuck into. Buskers on the Ball in Temple Bar in Dublin will be screening the Saturday and Sunday games this weekend. Among the fans in attendance will be the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast team. They'll be assembling for Giants at Saints on Sunday. So shout out to them and make sure to join the festive football fun at Buskers if you are in the vicinity. While the Week 15 action gets underway with Thursday night football, the Chargers travel to Allegiant Stadium to take on the Raiders. Even Brian and Shane Brennan have that game covered in our TNF podcast, which will be available from tomorrow morning. Brian, Raiders laying 3 points at home for that one, despite the absence of Justin Herbert. And the betting line is really just a field goal game.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of telling. We looked at the odds today when we were recording the podcast, and we had the QuinnBet odds up for the game. Raiders slight favourites of 4-6, 6-5 Chargers, and obviously to spread is -3. Kind of reflective of where I guess both sides are. It's a nothing game in many ways. Like what's to come in this league? It looks like Brandon Staley's going to lose his job, and I suppose for Antonio Pierce, he's trying to solidify that opportunity to put himself in the sweepstakes come the end of the season. But I guess I'm going to see two different quarterbacks. I suppose Aidan O'Connor, and we're going to see Justin Herbert's replacement for the time being. So look, there's a storyline or two to come from the game, but I think the odds on QuinnBet are very reflective of where both sides are, and it is genuinely one of those games that it's hard to call tomorrow night. But yeah, the podcast will be out tomorrow morning, myself and Shane, running through both teams and what our expectations are.
And credit to Davante Adams, just on the cusp of 1,000 yards. That guy can get 1,000 yards anywhere, it seems, doesn't matter what's going on around him. One of the great receivers in the league, and I'm sure someone who might be closely watched in the off season, depending on how things pan out for the Raiders as well. Well, our first segment, the game picks and previews, is brought to you by RuPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. You can see how RuPoint can help your business at rupoint.com. And just to note again that the first three games we're talking about here take place on Saturday rather than Sunday. That begins with the 6 o'clock game on Saturday night, where Cincinnati, even where the Bengals host the Vikings column. Both still in the wild card hunt here. Nick Mullins now confirmed as starter for the Vikings. The Josh Dobbs experiment, for now at least, is at an end, and the Jake Browning experiment very much continuing for Cincinnati. How do you see this one panning out?
Yeah, I suppose, Connor, the piece on this one is the fact that I talked about a little bit on Tuesday. The Vikings rolled the dice to see, how it might pan out for them. Ultimately, it hasn't, and it's quite something when a team that is, in the playoff hunt is making a change at QB, not because of injury, but purely on the basis of performance. I see Justin Jefferson has said he's playing, so that's going to help whoever is at QB. You have to be impressed by what the Bengals have been able to do in Burrow's absence, and the other piece to me about it is the coaching staff have done a really good job there, right? This offense was totally set up for Joe Burrow. They played in a very particular way. Jake Browning has come in, and within the space of 3 weeks, they have turned it, they've altered it so that it's going to his strengths. I really think that they have the ability to probably spread the ball around. I think the O-line has done quite well. Now they're going up against Brian Flores. That will be a real test. I think that is the piece to look out for in this game. The Bengals O-line versus the Vikings defensive coordinator who likes to blitz more than anybody else. I think this will be a tight game, but at home, I'm going to go for the Bengals.
Brian, one of the stingiest defenses in the league, as Colin has pointed out, the Vikings. But at the same time, you're looking at a Vikings team that's managed a total of 13 points over the last 2 games. Not exactly lighting it up.
No, and not to kind of carry on the betting trend, but looking at the over and under points on this game with QuinnBet, 39 points is the expectation. That's the over under. And bearing in mind, this Bengals offense, as Colin's rightly called out, have kind of reassigned the way of doing things, and obviously to Jake Browning's strengths, have scored 34 points consecutively in 2 games in a row, and yet the over-under is 39. So either they're expecting the Vikings defense to shut them down, or they just have little faith in the Vikings offense now, which, to your point, they're not really doing stuff. I think we might see a little bit of a kickstart with Mullen. Obviously, he came in and had some nice plays, but towards the end of the game last week to get them over the line, it wasn't anything too expansive, but at the same time, they did what they had to do. I'm with Colin. I think the Bengals right now, Zach Taylor and his coaching staff have yet again proven what a great combination they are, in particular the defensive side of things as well. Like when we thought the season was written off to go into Jacksonville, they win the game. They beat the Colts last week, which was another big game. And there's a few other games this weekend that are going to really show us who's going to the playoffs in the AFC side. I think the Bengals, if they get this one over the line, would be really in the sweepstakes. So for me, it's a Bengals victory.
Yeah, as you say, Brian, the Bengals locked in that group of 7 and 6ers in the AFC, a big logjam there. I think they'll be going to 8 and 6 this weekend. I think at home they will have enough to get past the Vikings. I'm very interested to see what Brian Flores does and how he approaches trying to shut down Browning on this offense. But I do think from what we've seen over the past couple of weeks, and from the fact that, unlike we talked about Kansas City in the past few weeks, everyone who you expect to step up in the supporting cast in Cincinnati on both sides of the ball is stepping up, particularly that elite wide receiver core they have. And I think they'll take this one myself. The 9:30 game column is Steelers at Colts. Mitch Trubisky still in the hot seat, it seems, for Pittsburgh. Gardner Minshew, of course, in relief for the Colts, and that's worked out pretty well. A team that's very much overreached themselves, playing a team that really has disappointed.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I suppose, is with the Steelers is the feeling around the camp, because the news out of New England is obviously huge if that comes to pass, and Bill not giving anything away, but a lot of talk in the aftermath of that today around Tomlin, and obviously huge, I suppose, support for Tomlin and everything he's done, but definitely a segment of the fan base there, amongst the Steelers, who think maybe it might be time for a change. Big Ben came out and said that he thinks that the culture that the Steelers had built is gone. I saw somebody say that that might have ended when Blake Bortles put 45 on them in their home stadium. But it feels different this year than it has, I think.
Not to sandbag you here, Colin, but did Tomlin ultimately waste the firing of Canada? Like, he hung on there so long. Like, that could have actually bought him a bit more time had he done it at an earlier stage, you'd think.
I mean, but what was the idea of bringing Canada back, Connor? Like, you knew what Canada was. Like, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. This wasn't, I suppose, and now look, it can be difficult, right? That you want to be able to trust your assistants, and it's not just a matter of going out and getting the best of them, right? We've seen how that worked in Carolina, the idea that you're going to bring in people with different philosophies.
And we've also seen in New England how bringing back the guy that you're familiar with doesn't necessarily work.
It's true, but I would also point out that Sean Payton has brought in Joe Lombardi there. Chargers fans would have gladly put him in a wicker man, I think, last year. But the thing is that he is working, like, it's Sean Payton's system, right? He only needs to be able to trust Lombardi, which he does because they've worked together previously. Tomlin, it's not his system. So he's needing somebody to create a system. And it's so I think the Steelers are in a weird space. I don't believe the Rooneys will move on from Tomlin. I don't think it matters how noisy the certain sections of the fan base are. I don't think they will. The Colts, on the other hand, are frisky. And if this was in Pittsburgh, I would say this is the absolute type of game that they love. Going up against Minshew, who is prone to mistakes, and a Colts team who I think are still finding their feet. But I think the Colts, I'm going to say they can do it. I think it probably might be a surprise. I have no idea what way the markets are. I think it might be a surprise, but I'm going to say that the feel good factor and a Saturday afternoon game in Indianapolis lends itself to the Colts getting a victory.
Yeah, I have to say, I've had the break of the ball with a lot of my picks this season, and I've had a pretty decent season pick-wise, but the Steelers, I just never seem to be able to get right. And part of this game, the narrative appeals to me that, this is where Tomlin shows the mettle. Anytime he's faced the doubters in the past, and last season, everybody was saying, ooh, the record of the winning record every season is under threat. He's never going to pull it out this year. And he did. They've won plenty of games against the head this year. And he's very much going to be looking to get a response from them, given what's happened over the past couple of weeks when they had games that everybody, themselves included, I'm sure, maybe that's part of the problem, had in the book as gimmies and had written down as W's in the calendar. They really should be at 9 wins now. But the fact that they're not tells you a lot about where the Steelers team is. They're just not very good. And like you, Colin, I think the home comforts in Indy will be enough to seal it for the Colts. You get good game, bad game from Gardner. I think he's due good game this weekend, and that's what I expect to see. Brian?
Well, first and foremost, Colin, the Colts are favourites. Favourites by 2.5 points, which essentially means it's a field goal type of game. That's the expectation. Colts win by a field goal or more. Colts defense, pick 6 last weekend. Colts defense, special teams blocked the previous week, return for a touchdown. Colts defense that I believe will feast.
Buckner is a bad man as well. He's playing himself into some pretty
feisty man. He's a feisty man. A defense that I believe will have more than enough to manage this Steelers offense, which, let's be fair, is just not efficient enough. They got back into the game last weekend, but I mean, did the Patriots ever really look like they were going to lose it in the second half? And we're talking about a Patriots team that had been one of the poorest teams of the season. They got out to a fast start. Mr. Trubisky looked like the Mr. Trubisky that has struggled over the course of the last 3 or 4 years as to why nobody really wanted to give him a proper opportunity to be a starting quarterback in the league. It's the Colts for me, and I'm surprised these are even doubtful on this one. I know I can understand the nature of the Steelers are so Jekyll and Hyde, and we've selected them to lose and they win, but not from me in this instance. I think we'll see a good reaction from the Colts, and they're very much in the mix, and they have to win. I think the field goal factor, as Colin has alluded to, at home will certainly be telling in terms of the crowd noise and the crowd being into it. Colts for me.
Colin, there's a lot of games this weekend that you think by week 15 you have a pretty good sense of where everybody is at, but I find there's a lot of games on the schedule, and we'll come to more of them later on, and this is one of them for me that I don't know whether to rely on the broader trend or to rely on the trend that we're seeing over the past couple of weeks in picking it, because something tells me that this Lions team is not in a very good place right now, given that they've just come off a loss to my own Bears, and that would be a fairly telltale sign or a red flag to many franchises. But that's not the first sign of weakness we've seen in the Lions. We've seen a lot of their flaws laid bare ever since, as you were saying, and the other night we saw them dismantled by the Ravens, and they never really managed to put it back together again in the way it was before. Coming up against the Broncos team that, 5-game winning streak ended, they got right back on the horse, no pun intended. A defense that's been creating a lot of turnovers. Javonte Williams getting into the end zone for the first time in nearly 2 years, I think, which is a good sign from a Broncos perspective. I'm gonna go here and be brave and pick first. I think Denver is going to sneak this one in Detroit.
I think if the Broncos do win this one, we're a shoe-in, I think, for the playoffs. I think this is a really difficult game for the Broncos in certain respects. I think it will be fascinating because for the Broncos defense, it's a real test. I think the Lions probably have the best 1-2 on the ground punch, right? And the Broncos have to show that they can deal with that. That said, we all know, and it's not any sort of secret, that Jared Goff struggles with the blitz, and Bill Belichick, put him in a blender in the Super Bowl, and Vance Joseph is second only to Brian Flores in his willingness to send guys and send different packages. Now, at the time that we're live, we don't know if Nick Benito is good to go. I don't think he will be, but I would still think Vance will send plenty. So it should be a real interesting matchup. The other thing, Connor, that probably people, if you're not a Broncos fan, you may not have picked up on, Kareem Jackson had a meeting with the commissioner, and he came out of that to say he's being picked on. He's not doing anything wrong, and he has no intention of changing the way in which he plays. So clearly that went really well. And, given Roger Goodell takes criticism notoriously well, and that he, holds all the power, I have no doubt that that's going to work absolutely fantastically for Kareem.
Yeah, quite right, Colin, in fairness. Those wide receivers have been running into his helmet. If people are going to pick up concussions on the field after getting smacked by Kareem Jackson, that's their business. He's the real victim here.
Indeed, he's lost $1 million thus far to the NFL. It's interesting. JJ Watt does the thing usually now at weekends.
Ironically, Colin, they weren't actually cheap shots. They were quite expensive for Kareem Jackson.
Indeed. Well, JJ does a piece where he kind of highlights some of the ways, the fines that the NFL has issued, and some of the ridiculous fines over the course of the season, where you're having to watch stuff, 3, 4, 5 times to figure out what exactly, why was that even a penalty, let alone a fine. Funnily enough, Kareem Jackson's not featured on any of those, actually, which is an interesting one in and of itself. I think this is a good test for both of these teams, but I'm going to back Sean Payton. It should be, again, there's so many subplots. Him and Dan Campbell have a lot of history, obviously, but I think the Broncos can go in and get the victory against a Lions team that are wobbling.
Brian, as Colin pointed out, you can very much get to Jared Goff if you get to Jared Goff and things go downhill at a rate of knots in that scenario. Packers did it. Bears did it twice in recent weeks, although, kind of succumbed to their own mistakes the first time around, and the Lions managed to pull out a victory from a very unlikely spot. But we've seen a lot of turnovers from Goff. We've seen a lot of poor throws in recent weeks. And we saw that offense, including the 2 running backs that Colin mentioned, very much shackled in Chicago at the weekend. The Lions really need this one, but will they get it?
And let's not forget the last home game in which they had against the Packers. They struggled for large parts of that game to run the ball efficiently against the Packers D. That's, it's turned its fortunes around over the course of the last couple of weeks. Obviously not on Monday night, but Colin said if the Broncos win this one, they're in a shoe-in for the playoffs. I wouldn't disagree with that. I read some things this week. A former colleague on the show, in fact, Frankie from the States, who would have helped us out on the instant reaction shows, he put up on social media this week, in fact, that he believes the Broncos are now the best team in the AFC. So never mind being a shoe-in for a wild card. He's suggesting they're ahead of the Ravens and the Dolphins after what he saw from the Dolphins on Monday night. So there is a great momentum and steam building up within Broncos fan base, and rightly so, because of the nature of how they've played. One concern I have for the Broncos in this game was, and we never really got into it, was against the Texans a couple of weeks ago, in the first half in particular, they were exposed greatly in the secondary. There was a number of expansive plays by the Texans which were very fruitful, and they got into scoring positions very early on, and obviously the Broncos never got a chance to catch up. And if Goff is on his game with the players they have, they can do that again, I believe. But again, ultimately the biggest question is how Dan Campbell approaches this week, bearing in mind the kind of misfortunes of last week and the difficulties they've had. I'm going to go Lions. I'm not convinced, but I think offensively they might get it right. And certainly in terms of getting it back together and not turning the ball over as much. And if they can put up enough points, I'm not sure whether the Broncos offensively can live with that. So I'll side Lions. I'm not comfortable with it. I can see this game going either way, but I think the Lions need it. And if they do win, they pull off the clean sweep of the AFC West this year, having beaten the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Chargers on the road. So I'll go Lions, but not convinced 100%.
All right, that brings us to Falcons at Panthers, the AFC South clash. Somebody has to win this accursed division, host a home playoff game, and either fall flat on their faces or get completely filleted the following week. And that might as well be the Falcons. At least that's what we thought until last week, when they had what looked like the NFC South championship game for them. They fell a little bit flat against the Buccaneers. That was despite a pretty good performance from Desmond Ridder, threw for 350 yards or thereabouts, ran for another score. Also, of course, this being Desmond Ridder, threw one of the worst interceptions you're ever likely to see, which only managed not to be a pick six because the defender fell over before he got to the end zone. Turned out he was down by contact, and the Bucs had to punch it in on the next play. Just did not see the cornerback when he threw that ball, which concerns you greatly when you look at Ridder, who can turn it on at times, and he did do that over the weekend, but they were out-battled by the Bucs, which is not something that you expected to say going into that game. They're on the road against the Panthers, who we last saw drop a 28-6. Another tough defeat against the Saints, who didn't have to do anything particularly spectacular to beat them, and I expect this one very much to follow that formula this weekend, albeit that it's in Carolina. And I think the Falcons have more than enough to go in there and do what pretty much every other team has done this season, bar that one lone win for the Panthers. I don't think they're going to be doubling their win total, and I don't think that number one pick that's heading to Chicago anyway is going to be in any jeopardy. I've got Falcons doing the business in this one. Brian?
Panthers for me. I think they turned the Falcons over. They turned them over last year when no one expected it on a Thursday night game. And I think that at some stage they're going to get a second win. It's just a case of when. They should have got it maybe 2 weeks ago against the Bucks. Held the Saints for a long time last week. Panthers.
Colin?
I'm going to go Falcons.
All right, our final game of the first segment is Jets at Dolphins. Brian, we last saw the Dolphins on Monday night dropping a horrendous loss where the Titans gave them 3 touchdowns and they still found a way to lose. Tyreek Hill got banged up, which is not what any Dolphins fan wanted to see, because the Dolphins ex-Tyreek are not the same team.
And Waddle got banged up quite early in the game. I think it was one of his first throws in the game, which he went for kind of one of those beautiful lateral moves where Waddle comes across and he got absolutely smashed by Duprez. And he never looked right for the rest of the game. And usually when Tyreek isn't at his best or else he's out of game, you can still rely on Waddle, but he was obviously struggling as well. We spoke during the week, Conor, about this MVP race. Now people suggested, well, that's Tyreek out of the picture now because he didn't play the game. And if anything, maybe he should be more in the race because it just goes to show how valuable he is to this team, because they weren't the same. But they weren't the same on Monday night for large parts of the game. They were never right. And then they get the ball back to win the game. See, this is the problem we have. Is it the Jets of old, or is it the Jets we saw last week, or is it the Jets we saw in the second half? Because their defense over the course of the season has played quite well, but I think the Dolphins will react well to Monday's loss in the sense of they'll come back and they'll win. But it does kind of give you concerns around where they are in the playoffs and obviously what's ahead for them. But in this instance, I think they should have enough to beat the Jets.
Colin, is there light at the end of the tunnel for you in this whole Zach Wilson thing after last weekend, or is that merely the oncoming train interview, which in this sense would be the Devon Achane train and the Tua Tagovailoa train that's coming to run them over?
Well, the concern for the Dolphins is the pass rush just looked non-existent, and that if they had a full defense, you'd be saying I'd say they were. They should really take care of business. But I do have concerns. And as Brian has talked about, like, this to me is why, JJ Watt is wrong. The quarterbacks are not always the most valuable. Like, Tyreek is the most valuable. It is asinine to say otherwise. Like, Tua is not the same QB when Tyreek Hill is not on the field. Defenses don't worry about Tua the way they worry about Tyreek Hill. They face up completely differently. I think if Tyreek plays, the Dolphins win. If Tyreek doesn't play, I believe that the Jets can and will win based off of their defense, because the Dolphins' run game just hasn't really hit the heights that it did early in the season, Conor, and they are banged up. And Mike McDaniel, I don't know, does he trust them when they get down, into the red zone in the run game as such? It seems to tighten up, and he doesn't seem to really believe that they can find the gaps. Like, they were good the other night outside of the red zone, right? That was fine, but once they got in, they didn't really have a run game. And Tua is a very talented QB, but I don't believe he's in the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen type where he can make magic happen in the red zone, right? Just find a play, find something open. And I think that is an issue. If Tyreek plays, they should win this. But I think, for a team that have really hit the heights at times, I don't know how many, will teams really, would you be really more concerned going down to play the Dolphins, or would you be more concerned going into Baltimore to play the Ravens?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I don't know if you heard Cam Newton throwing darts at Tua Tagovailoa, among others, today, saying he was just a game manager. I think that's very unfair. I think, to your point, he's a very talented quarterback, but he's not in that elite class. And I think we saw plenty of that on Monday. Whatever about Tyreek Hill's case for MVP, which I actually think, to your point, Brian, was underlined by how vital he showed himself to be in that game, through his absence, as well as the contribution he made when his wife told him to get his ass back on the field. They'll want her down on the sidelines set for this one as well in Hard Rock Stadium to get him motivated. But the opportunity was there for Tua to win that game. It was one of those funny ones where everything goes wrong, but you still have a chance to win. And that's what the great quarterbacks do. They make the play, they make the throw when you need it, which he didn't do. Like, it ended with a real whimper. And the way that Dolphins played in that spot. Now, I know that the O-line is a big concern. Teron Armstead is a massive loss. As you were saying, Colin, that the pass rush doesn't look the same with the injuries they've had there. At times you've seen, Van Ginkel and others step up and make plays, Jalen Ramsey or whoever, but that there just hasn't been enough of that. This goes back to a conversation we had during the Frankfurt game where, again, I think it was you said it, Colin, they just didn't seem to show the stones to win it when it was there to be won. They went away from the run when it looked like that was what was working for them. I don't know. Like we were saying the other day, there's no way this Dolphins team wins playoff games on the road. There's no way they go into Baltimore, they go into even Buffalo if it shakes out that way and win a game. I think they have to pull out games like this. If they're not beating the Jets, they might as well pack up their suitcase and go home. And that's no disrespect to this Jets defense, which has done phenomenal things to even keep them at the point where they're still in the playoff mix right now. Zach, to give him some credit, did put up a really good performance last week, was surprisingly clean. He talked about, there was a locker room conversation with Reed, I think the cornerback, who said that Wilson said, what have I got to lose? What are they going to do? Bench me again? Like, I'm going out there and I'm going to play for my life. And that's what he did. If he can do that again, this game is in more doubt than it should be, which is more a reflection of where the Dolphins are at, in my view, than where the Jets are at. But it's Miami for me.
AFC Player of the Week, Connor. Sorry to cut across you. AFC Player of the Week.
Indeed. Just on this, just while we're on the Dolphins, their injury report has literally just come out. Tyreek did not participate. Ankle, Teron Armstead, Elliott, Rob Hunt, Mostert, Achane, Liam Eichsberg, Xavier Howard.
Oh, Jesus. It's broken my fantasy league and I'm backing out of my pick now. Give me the Jets. Give me the Jets.
Is that for real now, is it?
We'll see. I'll reflect on it. That's the end of our first segment of previews, brought to you by RuPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. You can see how RuPoint can help your business at rupoint.com. We move into the second segment of game picks and previews now. It's the Sunday 6 o'clock slot that we're in now, having previewed the Saturday games. We have Giants at Saints. Brian, let's start with you on that one. We have the Big Blue podcast and Buskers on the ball this Sunday watching that game. I don't know if you'll be in attendance with the crew there. I'm sure you'll be putting in an appearance.
I am indeed, yeah. I'll be there on Sunday
Is it cutlets or jambalaya?
Well, it's all about him this week. What I would like to show out there is the Giants defense over the course of the season has played really well, and it hasn't been getting the credits deserved. And since this report came out about Wink and that, Brian Daboll kind of facilitated it well thereafter by giving him the gift in the dressing room. It's like when you have an argument with a close person in the family or a loved one, you go off and you splurge and buy them a nice gift. So he gave him a match ball, but ever since then, things have kind of turned. 11 turnovers in 3 weeks, the highest in the league right now. The defense played really well on Monday night, but obviously the quarterback situation is
all your defensive playmakers, including the permanently disgruntled McKinney, seem to be picking it up.
He in particular on Monday night was very impressive. Deontay Banks was very impressive. The cornerback, some lovely time plays in terms of blocking touchdowns. And Thibodeau, again, he's up to 12 sacks this year. He's really starting to come to the fore against a Saints team who, let's be fair, are inconsistent. Like, they struggled last week against the Panthers for 3 quarters. They put it away because the Panthers were poor. And I'm going to run with the quarterback fairy tale that is the fairy tale in New York. And obviously a period of time when we like to listen to that song. And I think the fairy tale is going to continue this weekend because I think he's going to have another strong game. And I believe the Giants will continue this bizarre run where they put themselves back in the picture to be in the playoffs. I'm going to go with the Giants to win.
Yeah.
And they're not favourites for this game, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I got to say, Derek Carr will be saying, I could have been someone. Well, so could anyone, and anyone is Tommy DeVito right now. I'm rolling with the Giants as well. Colin.
This is magic, and the story is fantastic. And I put it in the group the other day. Like, when I saw the agent, I and many others, because there are plenty of others, and I thought it was a bit. I really did. I thought this is a bit, but no. You go back, and this is not that the guy started dressing like this.
And let's put some respect on Sean Salato's name. He's a long-standing agent. He is not an extra from The Sopranos. He knows what he's doing. He's a lot of clients, including Tommy DeVito, have done very well from his astute management.
And he is in just about every Italian American Hall of Fame that exists. He's been getting awards left, right, and center, and not just on the basis of Tommy. The stat that stood out right in the game the other night, and where I think this will be won and lost, and where I fear that it might come down to earth. Tommy was taking sacks at a rate. If you pressured Tommy DeVito, chances were you actually got a sack. Okay, pressure into sack was above 50% until the other night, where the Packers could not sack Tommy DeVito. It was a bit like JP Acosta shared a gif of Aaron Donald trying to sack Lamar Jackson, which was somebody chasing a chicken. The Packers couldn't get to him.
It wasn't somebody chasing a chicken. It was Rocky chasing a chicken.
It was
famous
Rocky, yes.
theme.
Can I show another point in here? It's funny, and I know our column, like I agree with Colin on this one, but he was told before the game, if you feel there's a sack coming, just take off. It's fine. Don't be concerned. He takes off, and he ends up taking off for nearly 100 yards over the course of the game. Now, like, Saints will probably have a plan for that. Go ahead, Colin. Sorry, I'm seeing you.
I that's what I fear, Brian. I do think they will, because you watch. I think Joe Barry. The Packers have to make a change at defensive coordinator. They have to. Like he is like the way in which they knew what to do, and fair play to the Giants, right? They knew you're dead right. They told him what to do, and he just ran up the middle, which the Packers, there's been an issue for the Packers all year. I don't think Cam Jordan and the Saints will fall into that. I want this to continue. I want the Giants to win. I think it would be infinitely more interesting than a Saints team who I think are going to be looking at every which way they can get out of that Derek Carr contract. I don't know if people watching or people listening or either of you have seen the list somebody put on Twitter of the arguments Derek Carr has had with the various his various teammates. It is quite extensive already. I don't have...
Chris Olave is still my favorite one. I'm going to come back to it again. Throws the ball 20 yards out of bounds and shout to Chris Olave. Like,
yeah.
Mr. Fantastic doesn't catch that ball, Derek. Get over yourself.
Your best wide receiver, Derek. I just think that at home with the defense, they'll probably have enough, but I hope I'm wrong.
I don't. No eggplant. Right? No eggplant parm for you. No ziti. Now we got Bears at Browns up next. God help me, I kind of feel like the Bears can do this in this spot. 2 games back to back, the first back-to-back wins of the Eberflus era. Defense definitely been trending up, in fairness to Matt, and I've been one of his biggest critics throughout the season. He certainly knows how to coach a defense, and Bears now have the #1 running defense in the league. Been doing pretty well creating turnovers the last few weeks. I think they're second only to the Broncos since week 10. Colin, if I'm correct in my statistics. Jalen Johnson playing up in a contract year. Montez Sweat has made a massive difference. He's been exactly as advertised, which seems to have freed up the linebacker core there in Chicago. They're going into Cleveland, where the Browns are 6-1. And I think the Browns, we talk about a lot of teams being fraudulent this year. The Browns have played with 4 different quarterbacks. They have the scalps of the 49ers on their wall. They have the scalps of the Ravens on their wall, and those were not easily come by. They've pulled out wins where other teams have fallen flat this season, and they've done it in a serious amount of adversity, so I don't take them lightly. But I just think the Bears match up well here. I think they'll like the idea of getting to grips with Joe Flacco. I think Justin Fields is in a bit of a groove at the moment. He's obviously playing for his future at the moment, and so far he's been up to the challenge. I think the Bears are just about going to take this one out. A couple of weeks ago, if you'd asked me this, I would have had it chalk down as an L, and one of the tougher games that the Bears had facing down the stretch. But it was really interesting to hear Jaquan Brisker in in the Bears locker room at the weekend, talking about, the goal is to make the playoffs. We need to do whatever we can to try and make the playoffs. That is not something people would have laughed at a Bears player saying that a couple of weeks ago, and it's still a very, very long shot. I'm not deluding myself about that, but I do feel something's coming together. I feel something to get excited about. I'm waiting for that to explode in my face on Sunday. But for now, I'm picking Chicago. Brian.
All week I've been torn on this game. I genuinely have, because I picked the Browns to go to the playoffs at the start of the season, and I've been pleased in a way that they've kind of got back on track and will run the course of the season then with Joe Flacco. And I look at it, doesn't make sense for the Bears to win, because they're going to go into Cleveland and with such a strong home record and being number one, statistically the number one defense in the league, you would expect Justin Fields to struggle. But we have seen Justin Fields over the course of last week. He knows it's his window of opportunity to solidify his career there and stay on. This is it for him. And I think he's reacted very well to that. He played very well against the Vikings on the road, albeit they didn't put up any touchdowns. It was 4 field goals. He was really good last weekend. And I think the Browns could struggle to keep him in check if he gets out 57 yards last weekend. The running game is back in that kind of run-pass option mode. I'm also going to go with the Bears to cause a shock. I think they've won 3 of the last 4 games. And once we talk about the Giants of 5-8 having a shot at the playoffs, so do the Bears. And the Bears are playing with a bit of form. And I do agree. I think Flacco is there to be got it. And I'm going to go with the Bears to cause a shock. I think defensively they can do a number on Flacco.
Colin, we haven't had three of us go for the Bears all this season, and we never thought we'd see a time where it might even be remotely possible. Don't ruin this.
This is it's a fascinating tale, and we discussed it a little bit on Monday Night Show. Connor, I think we will have to discuss it again in terms of what the Bears are going to do, because Fields is playing very well, but he's playing for his future. Is that in Chicago, or probably more likely that it is elsewhere, but we'll see. So I think it should be an interesting game, but to me the Browns have finally found a formula that's working for them. I think it should probably give them pause that Joe Flacco sitting off the couch looks much better than their QB who they've given all the guaranteed money to. I think also genuinely, he has unlocked Elijah Moore in a way that we haven't seen other QBs do. And he's just playing he's just basically standing in the pocket, right? He doesn't panic when pass rushers come at him. He is prepared to launch it down the field. Sometimes it'll end up going for touchdowns. Sometimes it'll end up in horrific interceptions, which you won't quite believe how he didn't see the defender there. And it's probably also the fact that he's so much better than anything else we've seen, it really, not just for their starting QB, but for the backups as well. I can see why you're going for the Bears, but I'm going to say that the home aspect of it, and what happens when we all pick in the same way. So I think you should be happy that I'm going to go for the Browns and Kevin Stefanski. I mean, in fairness, Kevin Stefanski and Joe Flacco could do a kind of a twins movie, because they look very similar actually at this point.
Yeah, interesting to your point about the Fields and the number 1 pick. Owen Farrell, of course, saying that the Bears should get Marvin Harrison Jr. with the number 1 overall pick if they do end up deciding to keep Justin Fields. I think beating the Browns would go a long way to helping them make that decision, but we shall see. Brian, Chiefs at Pats.
I was thinking about the whole scenario at the weekend where the Chiefs were very disgruntled over the play. Look, we discussed it in great detail on Monday. I don't want to get necessarily into that, but I wonder, and we've seen it with siege mentalities, with more so probably Premiership managers over the course of the years, with Ferguson and even Wenger, I suppose, and Mourinho in particular, at times where everybody's against us and no one wants us to win. No one wants us to succeed. And I wonder, is that the Andy Reid kind of dynamic now with this team, because they're not playing well? We're going to get this team and rally them together to kind of in a strange way, last weekend worked.
Patriots magicked it up out of nothing. Remember that whole season where they went around talking about how nobody ever gave them any respect, even though all anyone did was talk about how incredible the dynasty was. And they described themselves as underdogs every week.
We're still here. We're still here.
Bizarre. Look, it works. The mentality works. They get this kind of. We've seen it over the course. You watch America's game every year. There's always a storyline as to when the season turn from. I don't necessarily think the season is going to turn based on Sunday's game, but strange enough, last weekend was good for them. Like the Dolphins lost, the Jags lost. They've moved up to the third seed. If the Dolphins lose again and they were to run the table with some of the games in which they come up, you would expect them, whether they play well or not, to win. They could find themselves in the 2 seed, and then they will get that Arrowhead playoff game, and potentially they get themselves back in the championship game. And who knows? But look, for this game, Belichick looks like he's on his way. It's pretty much been confirmed as what we really all knew anyway. It's a Chiefs win all day long for me.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, the Chiefs get back on track for me.
Colin, Bucks at Packers next up for you. Baker off the back of some good play and yet another winning game-ending drive last weekend with a Cade Otton pass to highlight there of what was quite a good win for them and a very important one in the division. They're still fighting for this one. Packers obviously took a loss to Brian's Giants over the weekend, which took a little bit of loss over what had been a really good run for them. It's an interesting tie for both teams. How do you see it going?
It is, and the Buccaneers have been pretty. They've been even in that loss to the Colts. I suppose they at least scored 20, and you can tell I've been scarred over the last few years as a Broncos fan. So when teams continuously score 20, I'm like, oh, okay, the offense is doing okay here. The Packers. I suppose they were going so well up until that game against the Giants, and I wonder, Connor, if some of that was just it being such a young team, right? The progress isn't always linear, and sometimes, especially when you come up against somebody like Wink Martindale, who's been around the league for a long time. Who has a lot of experience and is able to lean on that to cause some problems for that offense. I think perhaps that had, some of it. But at the same time, they are going to have to be, I think, at their best, because Mike Evans is having a magnificent season. He intends to get paid, whether it's the Bucs paying him or whether he's getting paid elsewhere. And Baker, again, is playing for his future. And the Bucs still have some talent on defense. Anton Winfield Jr. is really, really talented. So he's made some big plays over the past couple of weeks, even had a sack last weekend. So I think the Bucs are capable of causing problems, but I do think that the Packers can learn, young team, and I think that they can get back on track in Lambeau on Sunday.
I put a bit of an asterisk, not for any negative reason beside that Giants game, Brian, because I just think there's a little bit of magic in MetLife. I think the Tommy DeVito thing has kind of just been a really remarkable catalyst for New York, and I think the Packers just ran into a buzzsaw. Green Bay, I actually thought, played pretty well in that game. They moved the ball pretty well. To your point, Colin, they then ran into trouble in the red zone, and Wink had some of his good stuff going, and they don't necessarily have those grizzled dogs to come through in those big moments, as you say. But I've been quietly impressed by what I've seen from Green Bay and how they've turned things around from the rocky patch they had earlier in the season. I don't think they're one of the real heavyweights in the NFC right now, but I still think they're good value for that. I had them making the playoffs at the start of the season, and I haven't seen anything that's going to deter me from that right now. And I do think they're going to be victorious at home against the Bucs this weekend. Brian,
it's a difficult one. I'm torn. Colin's made so many of my points that I had highlighted here around how the Bucs and the nature of how they played, and they've won the past 2 games. And Baker Mayfield is playing like a quarterback inside of what we're used to seeing, and Mike Evans is playing so well. For me, the best player.
Funny, Brian, and sorry to cut across you, but I was just thinking about, we were talking about Tua earlier, just not showing up when the Dolphins really needed him. Like, Baker has done an awful lot to dispel some of the myths around, not myths, but some of the hard facts that we've seen around his play to date in his career. That game they lost against the Texans was a seesaw one where he put them in position to win. The game last weekend where could have gone the other way. Fierce divisional rivalry, and he's shown a cool head. He's led a couple of really solid fourth quarter winning drives, and they're there because of Baker's play this season.
Yeah, and exactly. I was going to go down that route, which is that he's taken the team on his back, on his shoulders at times, and found ways to get to victories. Like, you could argue he did everything. He touched on again. He did everything in his power to win that game against the Texans on the road. They've got into so many ding dong high scoring games this year. And you didn't expect that from the Bucs team going into the season. We looked at the players, but they still got Godwin and Evans, and White has been a really leading light this year. He came out of Arizona last year, out of college, and didn't really get going last year. But this year, you're seeing, I suppose, the merits as to why they went after him. For me as well, the Packers offensively, Watson has really come to the fore over the course of this season. He didn't play last Monday, and it was a big difference in the team. And then they were missing Alexander on the defense again, another player who's a standout player. I think this might be a high-scoring affair. But again, similarities to what we've seen in the Bucs. I am going to lean Bucs. I think Baker Mayfield finds a way to get this one over the line. I think it's a real playoff type of game because both teams really need it. Both teams are same record. You could argue they're both in the wild card. Bucs obviously division there to be won. I think they'll go in there and cause a shock and turn them over. It could come down to a late score in the fourth quarter.
All right, that's the end of our second segment of games. We move into our third segment now, and Colin, 49ers play the Cardinals this weekend. A couple of weeks ago, you would have said absolute slam dunk. Let's move on. Cardinals, of course, though, coming off that win against the Steelers and coming off a bye too. The 49ers are rolling, but this might not be one that they have all their own way.
No, I mean, well, look, the Cards have been feistier than expected, and Kyler has done well since he came back. And, I think he can be capable of making some big plays, but he does turn the ball over a little bit. That's gone up the rate since he has come back in. The other problem is that the Cards are giving up the most yards on the ground against when they're at home. And the 49ers don't seem to mind whether they're on the road or not. If people haven't seen, Ben Solak from The Ringer did a really interesting video on why Brock Purdy shouldn't be the MVP. Again, like to a very good QB, but he breaks it down, like some of the stuff. Like there was like the other day, the concept, and the Seahawks took away two of the options for him, so he just throws it to Debo, and Debo turns a 2-yard pass into 30 yards on the ground, where he breaks through 2 tackles and is finally brought down when there's 3 guys on his back. When Debo is playing this way and Christian McCaffrey is playing as he is, and Christian McCaffrey has the most yards from scrimmage, it's difficult to see beyond them. The Jonathan Gannon, in fairness, after a really kind of rough opening to his time with the Cards, has been much better in terms of at the podium and stuff. He talked about the Niners being the gold standard. It's where the Cards want to get to. They have the picks to use this year. It's really difficult to see any way that the Cards can upset it. It is the NFL. Any given Sunday, anything can happen. But the Niners, they are approaching it. Even last week, like the fake punt, right? The fact that the punter decided that himself, it tells you the level of confidence and the freedom that this Niners team are playing with. Yeah, they should win this one.
Brian?
Since the Niners have come back after bye week, they haven't given up more than 20 points to an opponent. Their defense is the best in the league in terms of points given up. And they've won 5 games in a row by more than 10 points. It's a Niners victory all day long for me. I can't see any scenario where the Cards win. They're 2-2 with Kyler Murray since he came back, but he might play well, but it's a bigger task.
Yeah, same
Niners.
for me.
Yeah.
Niners in that one. For all the reasons you've both outlined. Brian, stay on deck there. You've got Commanders at Rams to kick us off there. Rams can count themselves unlucky not to get a win on the road in Baltimore, and they are not easily come by, to be fair. Commanders, we don't know what they're playing for towards the end of the season, so it's lining up for a Sean McVay victory. But will it be that straightforward?
Sometimes when these games looks very straightforward, they tend not to be. It looks like a type of trap game for me, for the Rams. Haven't played so well last week. I mean, the last 3 games, they put up over 30 points offensively in each game, obviously coming out the right side of 2 of them. I mean, you're talking about job security and ball security and everything. Like, what to say, ball security is job security. So that could be Sam Howell, and obviously then there's the head coach and security, which I'd imagine it won't be the case come the end of the season for Ron Rivera. I can only see a situation where the Commanders are playing to try and save his job, but for the Rams, I don't think they'd get caught up in just being a trap game, because I think Sean McVay is so clued in and dialed in at the moment. I mean, he was clearly very frustrated by, we're talking about poor refereeing decisions at times last weekend. I mean, that game and that particular punt return, there was 4. If you look at the coverage over the course of the week, there was 4 holes on that particular punt and not 1 flag, which is bizarre. They've been really strong at home. Very, expansive offense and very good to watch. So for me, it's a Rams victory. Rams are certainly one of the teams I think really are on the cusp of potentially going into the playoffs and causing a shock, because they will have to go on the road, but they're well capable. Just in what we saw last weekend against arguably the number 1 seed in the AFC.
Yeah, we didn't get to it on Monday because we spent time talking about other things. But I was wondering, should we have a look at or throw out who our dark horses for the Super Bowl might be once we discussed all of the real contenders in our view? And Rams, I have to say, were top of my list because they've got a lot of things on the bubble there. Offensively, obviously, we've been delighted with the play of Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, and others. Defensively, they still got Aaron Donald as their anchor there, and they're getting just enough. That's probably the one area where they do need improvement. But as you say, Brian, they've been scoring a lot of points. If you go to Baltimore and you end up losing to a walk-off punt return in overtime, I think not many teams are going to take the Ravens that close in that cauldron. Mark Andrews there or not. Rams can count themselves very unlucky to come out the wrong side of that one. I don't think they're a team that's going to spend too long licking their wounds or feeling sorry for themselves. I take your point, Brian, that there's a perspective on this that you think it's a bit of a trap game. There's also a perspective on this that you think it's a bit of a get-right game, and I'm going in that direction. It's the Rams for me. Colin?
Talking about trap game, it feels like that this season was almost a trap in a different sense for kind of Ron Rivera, in that, like, the new owners came in, they didn't have time to probably make the changes they did, but they, it sounds right that like Bieniemy was kind of not Ron Rivera's choice. Now, that look, the owners get to do what owners want, but ultimately we've seen them actually move on from 2 of their pass rushers, and then they end up firing Del Rio because they get worse on defense. I think this season, I think they know that they're going to be sweeping changes in the coaching staff. It's about deciding, I suppose, whether they're going to continue with Sam Howell or not. That appears to be what Ron Rivera is kind of hanging his hat on, is, look, I'm developing a young QB, but that's not going to be enough to save him. I think Sean McVay has done a magnificent job. You both kind of covered it, but he every single week, and Andrew Whitworth was on with Kevin Clark today. It was a really interesting piece, and he was talking about McVay, and he was talking about Aaron Donald. I think that they look, kind of supercharged now, and especially at home. You'd expect them, given like they also, their last game of the season is in Santa Clara against the Niners. I think they would like to be in a position where that wasn't, they weren't reliant on needing to get a win there. They've got the Commanders, the Saints, and Brian's Giants up next. I think they need to win the 3 of the last 4. So I expect them to take care of business.
Right, Cowboys at Bills is next up. Maybe I'll step into the leadoff position here. There's a lot of talk about whether that win in Arrowhead, that the Buffalo Bills might have kind of restarted their engine there. Josh Allen in recent weeks has been very much in that hero mode and putting the team on his back, but not doing what he did early on in the season, which was overextend and throwing, poor interceptions, doing everything right. I'm not sure how much value to place on that win in Kansas City, given everything that's going on there. And that's the question mark that's in my mind. I think if you're looking at the Cowboys and you're looking at that win against the Eagles over the weekend, for me, a lot of this comes down to where the Cowboys at mentally. Like, are they going into this game complacent, or are they going in with that blue chip win in their back pocket, the one that everybody's been waving at them saying, yeah, you've beaten a bunch of teams that are sub 500, you've padded your record, you have this great home record, but you go in somewhere now. So the next step after Philadelphia at home is to go somewhere meaningful like Buffalo, like Orchard Park, and come out with a win. And that's a big test for Dallas. What we've seen, the pattern of this season is every time a team gets a 4 or 5 winning streak together, and every time we start docking them up, the train derails. I'm not sure that that's this game for Dallas. I think a lot of things are trending in the right direction for them. They've just been such a juggernaut offensively. They put up so many points. They put up more points than any other team, but they've got more than enough on the other side of the ball as well that they're not going to be overawed facing Josh Allen and this Bills offense, where still for me the big question is, you take Stephon Diggs out of the game, what are they going to do? You're putting an awful lot on Josh Allen, and those are very broad shoulders, as we know. I don't like putting Josh Allen into the meat grinder against Dallas. I think the Cowboys will win this. I think the Bills will have more than enough to say about the direction of the game. I think it's going to be very close, but I think it's going to be a Dallas win. Brian,
it comes as a surprise to me that QuinnBet and the betting market has the Bills as favourites for this game, because you touched on there, this Cowboys team are firing all cylinders. I get the point around. We've blown these teams up, and everybody has it in terms of they go on and run, and then the run comes to an end. It comes to an end badly. But was that not supposed to be last weekend? Because everybody kept suggesting Cowboys have never really beat a team with really real kind of, I suppose, ambitions to be in the playoffs and certainly be in the Super Bowl. And last weekend was that game, and they manhandled the Eagles. And I think I'm with you on this. I think the Cowboys will win this game. I think the Bills, yes, they needed that last weekend, and there's a lot of talk, and a lot of people are kind of running with the narrative this Bills team can get hot at the right time, and they've still got a Super Bowl squad. But I don't think they've got a Super Bowl coaching staff right now. I think the head coach is, he's been coaching in a poor manner all over the course of the season. He looked like a very relieved man on the sideline last weekend, and I don't think the team have the same cohesion in which the Cowboys have right now. And I think defensively, with Micah Parsons and all the various players in which are there at the disposal of Quinn, I think Josh Allen has a tough day. And I agree, I'll go Cowboys.
Colin.
So, I mean, I think we all probably agree that Dak is playing the best football of his career, that CeeDee Lamb is playing the best football of his career, that Cowboys defense looks absolutely phenomenal. They keep finding these players who either get interceptions or pick sixes. We're agreeing that Mike McCarthy looks like he's making all the right decisions, and things are going absolutely in the right direction. That Jerry is maybe it finally having cut the cord with Zeke. This is it.
Jesus, the more you're talking, Colin, the more you're making me want to reverse my pick. It's all going far too well.
It has, because they're about to run into the chaos machine that is Josh Allen. And I think that to me is the only way the Bills can win this. And I know, Connor, you're saying you don't want to put it on his shoulder, but I think you can, because he is built unlike any other quarterback in the league. Like, you saw Levis the other night, and that was impressive. But you see Josh Allen just does that, and doesn't even need to do the grimacing that Will Levis does and the flexing and everything else. Players just bounce off of him. He is the only thing that the Bills really have going for them, and we've discussed all the off the field stuff. So I'm going to say, it might be that that Fred Flunk can be absolutely delighted that we aren't all going across the board. But I'm going to say that the Bills get the win, and I would circle week 18, Bills against Dolphins, because I think the Bills could still be capable of winning the East.
All right, interesting. Well, in Sunday Night Football, we have Ravens visiting the Jags, Brian, and Ravens got a bit of a helping hand with Miami dropping that game to Tennessee. The Jags, of course, got coming off a loss against the Browns, so it's been very much flowing in Baltimore's direction. But this is not an easy place for them to go and get a victory, regardless of a slightly banged up Trevor Lawrence. This is a Jacksonville team that's shown some serious form this season and has some pretty good scalps on their own wall.
Yeah, and let's not forget that was the Jags lost last weekend. I mean, they came back into the game quite well, and obviously they went, at the end with the 2-point conversion to try and put themselves in a position to reduce the score where they, get the onside kick, etc., and go on and potentially win the game. But like they let that go. They let the game slip early, and they let the game slip early the previous week against the Bengals, who allowed the Bengals to kind of build up a lead, and they came back well, but unfortunately wasn't debate. Like how fit was Trevor Lawrence last weekend, and how much more improved will he be this week? Because they have been really, at times, really attractive to watch and really expansive offensively. They beat the Ravens at home last year, and it was a bit of a turning point for them. They were down by 10 points late, and they came back. And there were so many games last year which the Ravens didn't put away, and even though they're number one seeds, they still make me nervous because they're not blowing teams out. They've blown a few teams out over the course of the season for various different reasons, where teams were down players and down quarterback. But they don't strike me as a team that puts the dagger in and kills teams off. And if you leave the Jags hanging around, and the Jags need us, when sometimes in the NFL, we spoke about earlier in the season, sometimes desperate teams need to find ways to win. And for that reason, I'm going to go with the Jags and cause the surprise on Sunday Night Football. I think the Jags will stem the flow of teams potentially creeping up on them in the division and somehow come out with a victory. And it won't be pretty, but they'll find a way.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Baltimore on this one. I just think one of the quirks in the NFL is how volatile turnover stats are. I think Jacksonville were benefiting from a lot of picks. They were catching a lot of interceptions at a certain point in the season, and results were flowing in their direction because of that. They interception stats are very volatile and go up and down. You can be defending really well and you just don't get your hands on the ball. The tips and overthrows don't drop in the right way. I think Jacksonville were getting a little bit of ball luck, and that's kind of deserted them at the moment. I think that's what they will need to pull out a result against this formidable Ravens team, who, to be fair, and you made the point, Brian, the Ravens dropped this one last year. They had a 10-point lead and then it slipped. They've had a bit of a worrying trend of building up these double-digit leads and taking their foot off the gas. And look, we talked about how they escaped at the weekend against the Rams, despite perhaps LA feeling that they might have come out the right side of that one. But no, I think Baltimore gets it done this weekend. Colin, how do you see it?
Like the Jags have had moments, I feel, over the course of the season, but it has felt like with the injuries that Lawrence has had and with some of the play calling, I don't know why Doug doesn't just take back over the play calling, because it seems so labored all the time, like when they're trying to move the ball. And like given their record, it tells you that even despite how labored it is, they still have talent. That I'm saying that change the play caller. But they're 8-5, and the QB has, I would say, been injured for 4 or 5 of those games at least. He's still out there kind of making plays. But I do think I think, take Brian's point, I think he's right in that this is a Ravens team who at times have failed to finish teams off. But I think that, it can and they got away with it a little bit against the Rams, but sometimes that can be a galvanizing force. I think they will have looked at what happened at the Chiefs. They will look what has happened with the Dolphins, and they will see that this is an opportunity for them to get the number 1 seed. And it's possibly the best chance they'll have in quite some time, because will the Chiefs be this rocky again next year? We don't know. So I'm going to say that the Ravens get things sorted out, and they do finish it, and that they will ultimately end up as the number 1 seed.
All right, before we go to Monday Night Football, we've one more game, which is Texans at Titans. I'll kick off here. I think this is a coin flip game for me. CJ Stroud still in the concussion protocol. We've got Nico Collins banged up there as well. Tank Dell obviously out for the season, which was very unfortunate for Houston. The injuries are really stacking up there, and that's put them in a difficult spot. Well and all as they play this season, and it's a remarkable coaching job by D'Amico Ryans to get them in the position that they're in, where they're in that 7-6 bunch. Titans, meanwhile, coming off that morale-boosting win in Miami, despite the fact that they seem to do everything that they could to lose it. Will Levis, to give him his due, also pulled off some big plays, lowered the boom on a couple of defenders as well when he was running. He's clearly gutsy. He doesn't suffer from any lack of confidence, particularly in the way he flexes after he pulls off those big plays. Colin, as you were saying, something that Josh Allen doesn't need to do, because it's just right keen, like that's his job. When Josh Allen does it, Will Levis feels the need to put an exclamation point on it. The Titans, though, one of the things that impressed me in that Miami game was they went to a bar fight in the football game, just had to break out. Like, they really did intimidate the Dolphins at times. That was a game that made me look at Miami very differently, but it was a game that reminded you Mike Vrabel has a hard-nosed football team in his hand. They're very much built in his image, and they're playing at home against a Texans team that just looks like it might have gone one game too far. I think without CJ Stroud, and certainly without Nico Collins, if that does turn out to be the case, I don't fancy them in this spot. I don't think the Titans are any great shakes, but they're also not an easy out. And I think this is a home win for Tennessee. Brian.
They should have beaten the Colts the week prior to that as well, if it wasn't for an injured punter and unfortunate circumstances within overtime. They would have been on a 2-game roll. Yeah, you're right. Will Levis obviously showed something last weekend that we hadn't really seen him, like even in the first game where he had that really expansive offensive game with the 3 touchdowns. We didn't see that kind of character and the fighting kind of player that we saw on Monday night. It's very much looked like a team. I don't know necessarily they're playing to impress the head coach, because of the suggestions he might move on and potentially be the next Patriots head coach. But you'd wonder, is this team kind of rallying because they don't want to lose this head coach? I think the Texans are running into a wall, and we could call it the rookie wall, which we've seen many times, but we're not sure where CJ Stroud is. There's too many injuries right now for this Texans team. And I agree, I'm going to go Titans, but if the Texans had everybody available and it wasn't a Tank Dell injury situation and CJ Stroud coming off the concussion, I would be leaning Texans. But for me, Titans. If Davis Mills going to step in and be the man to take them forward, I'm not convinced, so I'll go Titans as well.
All right, Colin, is the cupboard really bare for the Texans, or can D'Amico Ryans and their coaching staff show us something this weekend?
Big admirers of them, but it's unfortunate that I know from what I saw earlier, and things can change rapidly. Collins was at practice, but he wasn't on the field. But yeah, it's just, when you have that many injuries to that many key players, and I do think there's something in it for the Titans in terms of wanting to keep Vrabel the head coach around. Well, you could argue Vrabel the GM, a little bit like Belichick, like the GM. But he had a Belichick-like moment on the sidelines the other night as the player tried to explain why he had muffed the punt, and Vrabel was having absolutely none of it, and he let him know in no uncertain terms he didn't care. The other thing is, what's might be more terrifying than normal Mike Vrabel, who is is a terrifying individual. Mike Vrabel, I saw today the videos coming out of the press conference. He was clean shaven for the first time I've ever seen. I don't think the man was born clean shaven. So this was a terrifying sight. Like, it was like when Kelsey went clean shaven in the summer and very quickly had to do up an MS Paint profile photo where he put the beard back on. I just think this is probably a bridge too far. I think D'Amico will scheme something up. I think it will be close, but ultimately, with Hopkins playing how he is, I mean, surely there are teams out there who are really struggling for receivers, and Hopkins made it very clear he didn't have very many options. It's a nice one to have. Are you telling me that Bryce Young wouldn't look a great deal better if DeAndre Hopkins was there? Some teams regretting that one. I think the Titans can get another victory here.
Brian, we move on to Monday Night Football, and obviously we're astute judges of the game, and we wouldn't lower ourselves to such populist lines like this is a who wants it more game, but in some ways I have to say this is a who wants it or who needs it more game. Both of these teams coming off losses, both of these teams for very different reasons really, really, really need this one.
Yeah, it's a game we probably would have looked at 3 or 4 weeks ago and felt that the Eagles would go in and dominate and win efficiently, as they have done for large parts of maybe the last couple of years, maybe not to the levels of last year, even at the early stage of the season where they weren't playing as well, but still winning games. Who's quarterback right now for the Seahawks? Obviously, is the most intriguing conversation here, because Colin rightly called out, like, was Drew Lock has maybe 2 or 3 plays in his armory at times in a game. Over the course of 4 quarters, he comes back to the norm, and in terms of interceptions and struggles, and doesn't pick up blitzes and doesn't pick up the reads, correctly, and finds himself struggling. This has to be a get-right game for the Eagles, surely. Like, they must recognise now that, and we talked about it interestingly on Monday, despite all the flaws of how they played and the fact that they lost on Sunday, if they win out, and it's very likely they will win out, bearing in mind they've got the Giants twice, Cardinals, and obviously this weekend. It's all there for them. It's there in front of them. Like, the 49ers still to play the Ravens. It's not against the realms of possibility this team still end up with the 1 seed and put themselves in a prime position to be back in the Super Bowl. I think the Seahawks right now are struggling considerably compared to what we saw last year. I think it's too much of an ask. Things don't seem right. We've seen DK Metcalf go off the handle a couple of times over the last while. It doesn't strike me as a game, despite the kind of reaction of the crowd on a Monday Night Football and going in against the 12th man. I still think the Eagles will find a way to get this one over the line. So Eagles for me.
Yeah, I think the Seahawks are very much a momentum team. I don't trust the defense at the moment. I think they got some really good players there, but they're less than the sum of the parts right now. I think, we've talked about the Eagles' relative offensive troubles, and they really have spun the wheels in a couple of spots over the last few weeks. But that's playing the 49ers and the Cowboys. The Seahawks are just nowhere near that category. I don't think they're going to be able to keep Jalen Hurts and this Philadelphia offense, who'll be just chomping at the bit to try and get back to their best and to show us what they can do. I think they're looking at this stretch of games in a very different way to they looked at the way they looked at the last 4 games, where they've had, as we said time and time again, a brutal run and short rest, especially with the Buffalo game going to overtime and then having to go in and face the 49ers and then into Arlington at the Cowboys. Yeah. This is a very different assignment. I think it very much is a get-right game, which is very disrespectful to Seattle, who are nobody's mugs either. Criticism that I've just voiced there notwithstanding. I thought they showed up very strongly when they went into Arlington, and they've been able to put up points, and they've been, they didn't roll over against the 49ers either, and they did actually manage to cover the spread, widespread though it was. But I still think Philadelphia are going to come out here the right side of this one. Colin, for you?
Yeah, so it's more than 15 years since the Eagles last beat the Seahawks. They've lost 7 on the bounce. And Pete Carroll first 4-game losing streak. So it should be an interesting one there. Like, the DK stuff is fascinating, right? Because this is the guy who he's more than like, he's a caricature in some ways, right? In that, like, the size and the speed, and people know that you can get under his skin. Like, I saw a report, but it was from one of those aggregator accounts. You don't know how much stock to put in it, but apparently the 49ers, basically knew that, or went out of their way to get under DK's skin. Now, I can imagine that Nick Sirianni and the Eagles will do the exact same thing, and we'll see. I would be similar to Brian. I think who the QB is a key component here. Because the Eagles' pass rush has just been non-existent. It just has not been a factor. And that, to me, is one of the big issues that they face. I think they have to... They need to stick with the run game more. That we discussed that a little bit on Monday. I think they've been getting away from that far too early, and then they're too reliant on AJ Brown. I'm gonna go against myself, and I'm gonna say that Pete Carroll is not gonna lose 5 on the bounce, and it's the Eagles pass rush is gonna be ultimately what cost them. Now, that's with Gino. If it's Drew Lock, I don't have the faith in Drew Lock. Drew Lock overcomes Pete Carroll's ability not to ensure he doesn't lose 5 on the bounce.
The first weekend of the season where Colin has gone for both sides. We just doing those little crossover on our big segment that goes there.
Just pick the tie. Nobody's picked a tie so far this season. Right. It remains to be seen who will come out the right side of that one and who'll be getting the game ball. But we know who'll be getting our game ball. And we did the draw this morning for the beautiful Wilson ball that our glamorous assistant Brian is going to model there, the Duke. And the winner, drum roll, is Rory Fitzgerald. So that one will be winging its way to you. Brian is going to throw a Tommy Cutlass-like deep ball there and hit you right in the numbers. He'll get that over to you, probably by a slightly more prosaic delivery mechanism than that, let's be fair. But congratulations on that one. And thanks to everyone who entered that competition for the Wilson ball. You stay tuned on our social channels. We'll have more prizes coming up. Who knows, maybe over the festive period we'll be able to do another giveaway, and we'll have a Wilson ball or similar to go to one of our lucky entrants. All right, that's it for this evening. A lot of football to enjoy this weekend. Can't wait for those Saturday games to roll around. Certainly easier to get over the 1 start when it's in the early hours of Saturday morning rather than when it's in the early hours of or Sunday morning rather than when it's in the early hours of Monday morning. Really looking forward to it. I hope you are too.